Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you again. Um, we have thought of making a series of videos in order to um, refresh some of the fine memories many of you have of the wonderful visits to the tropical rainforest, and probably inspired many of you who have never been to the tropics and Costa Rica is in your wish list to come visit Costa Rica, learn, and of course have a lifetime experience with us. This morning we are going to have, in this series of videos, we are going to start with an introduction to the tropical rainforest, and we will make a progression of different videos in order to understand the dynamics of the forest, biodiversity, nutrient cycling phenomenons, and other issues that concern all of us in order to enhance our experience in the tropics. I would like to start though with a view of a tropical landscape. So when you visit the tropics, in many parts, what you are going to see is something very much like what you're looking at right now. Mountains everywhere, lush forests, and also open areas that have been devoted to agriculture and pastures. This is what happens in the forest, and it could be true not only for Costa Rica, but for other Central American countries and South American countries. But it's definitely breathtaking. So now, well, let's get in the woods and let's get to the matter. Well, the first impression of a tropical rainforest is definitely overwhelming. Those of you who enjoy plants definitely will find this most surprising. In very small and compressed areas, we find a myriad of plant forms that is definitely exceeding the average in other regions of the world. Dark inside, tropical forests are lush, green, full of life, and of course the fundamental variable that makes a tropical rainforest a rainforest is for sure the rain. Scientists estimate that it's enough for a forest or for a tropical ecosystem to receive approximately 80 inches of rainfall a year on the constant basis from month to month to have some conditions that will make it feasible to qualify as a tropical rainforest. But of course, tropical rainforests that are considered authentic tropical rainforests must receive precipitations above 200 inches or a little bit less, maybe 180 inches of rainfall per year and above until you reach the top, probably 400 inches in some regions of the world or more. Definitely, it's important for everyone to know that the fundamental aspect of the realm of richness of these tropical forests is definitely the rain. The rain, abundant precipitation, is key to guarantee the life existence in tropical rainforests. Walking through the tropical rainforest, at times, one can find forest gaps. That means that among all this density, all these lush forests above us, every once in a while we find light gaps in the middle of the forest. And immediately the visitor notices that trees have fallen. Trees fall for various reasons. One can be earthquakes, heavy rains, strong winds, heavy rains in the form of hurricanes, of course, or tropical storms. Earthquakes is another reason, and of course another reason can be human disturbance. If these forest gaps become significant, um, usually ecologists call this particular disturbance in the forest a jungle. So areas that have been disturbed to a certain extent are technically called jungles. But the dynamics of the forest is so amazing, so incredible, that a lot of plants and trees of the tropical rainforests, once dropped on the ground, will remain dormant for a period of time to become early successional pioneers. That means that when the gap is created and when the sunlight comes through the forest and hits the forest floor, all those dormant seeds are going to start forming little saplings. And very quickly, by investing a lot of energy in growth, we will have a complete different composition of plant life in the middle of the gap that will definitely be important for the forest ecological dynamics. These forest gaps are frequently found in tropical rainforests and are very important to complete natural cycles of the forest, especially those that naturally occurred. Of course, when we have a major human impact in some areas, of course, this is completely out of the question, but anything that happens naturally is just happening for a reason, and it's important for the forest. Rainforest physiognomy is also another important aspect to be able to understand the way the rainforest is being built. Of course, we have different types of ecosystems. We have primary forests and secondary forests. In primary forests, you usually find tall trees, pretty scattered, but very tall trees, some of which surpass probably 90 feet to reach the top. Rainforests are particularly noticeable because of the deep shade they produce to the understory. Right now we're looking at an old-growth forest in my property, and of course you can see the scattered trees right there, all of which are of different species. It's very interesting right there. Look at the canopy. We were just looking at the understory a second ago, and probably you noticed that the understory is dense. It's not easy actually to determine where the line of the understory goes. Trees like the ones you're looking at right now, especially up in the canopy, are commonly pollinated by animals, probably bats, hummingbirds, and of course insects, and some are wind pollinated. Flowering and fruit is very seldom seasonal, but in most parts of tropical rainforests in Central America and South America and other parts of the world, flowers and fruits are very evident and relatively easy to find on the monthly basis. Large leaves, especially in the understory, are common to be able to gather more sunlight due to the fact that sunlight is kind of difficult to obtain in the bottom levels, and relatively smaller leaves up in the canopy because they're straight facing the sun, pretty much like little solar panels. Trees often have buttress roots, and we will see buttress roots in just a few minutes. When you look at the bark of trees, you will notice that the bark of some trees is highly variable. In this case right here, because of the type of ecoregion we're at, there's a pretty consistent coloration on the bark of most trees, pale to green, blotchy in some cases when lichen grows on it. Also, another interesting thing that people notice when you walk in a tropical rainforest are definitely epiphyte plants and climbing plants. Look at this epiphyte right here on the right, a member of the aroid family, just hanging in the tree right there. But you find variety of other things. Lichens, notice that we have an incredible amount of lichen forms, like this one right here. Look at the lichens, mosses, tiny bromeliads, orchids, and hundreds of other little things that are just hanging in the tree trunks. Vines and lianas are also common, and you can see them just climbing the trees, and are just abundantly found in many areas within the tropical forest. If you look at the ground, you will notice that there's a very fine film of dead leaves on the ground. This is also called leaf litter. And notice that it doesn't build to be actually a thick layer of leaves, because we are in warm regions of the world. Biological activity in the forest floor is extremely complex, keeping the leaves pretty much under control and on a rather thin coat or film. The tropics are similar in climatic conditions. So if we stand right here in a Costa Rican jungle today, and if I take you to the Democratic Republic of Congo, or a jungle in Borneo, or to a jungle in India, or South America, structurally, the rainforest will look very much the same. So at a first glance, jungles are going to be, or rainforests are going to be very much the same, very much matching the description I just gave you. But if you start inspecting closely at what's inside, you are going to start finding very incredible differences among this rainforest. And this could be, well, this is even true here in Costa Rica. I mean, if I take you from this ecosystem we're at right now to a higher level, into the cloud forest, of course, we are going to find different plants, different animals, and different birds. So even in a very small area, you tend to find a variety of different organisms. So, and this usually involves a 2-hour drive here in Costa Rica, and that's why Costa Rica is so appealing for tourists, because in just 2 or 3 hours, you can be in a completely different eco-region looking at completely different things. And so these geographical variations of biological diversity are predominant in tropical rainforest ecosystems. Well, one thing visitors of tropical forests behold when they first visit one of these fabulous ecosystems are definitely these kind of roots on the trees. These are buttress roots. We have buttress roots and prop roots, and I'll show you prop roots in just a second. But buttresses are amazing because they flare out of the trunk to form some kind of a flange-like base. Um, Buttressing, it's easy to find near streams or on inclined terrain, riverbanks as well, uh, or where trees lack tap roots. It's known, or it's pretty much like a final conclusion that buttresses are present in poor soil areas and are conducive to help the tree absorb nutrients from the ground, as well as becoming supportive, like a stand, like a tripodal condition, in order to help the tree gain support from possible natural phenomena like winds, earthquakes, heavy rains, and others, so they can maintain the tree standing for longer periods of time. And despite the fact that happens, yet trees fall uh, on inevitably on the ground. Remember that most recycling minerals, and we are going to talk about this later, most of the minerals stored in the forest floor are stored in something called the humus layer, which is a very thin film of dead leaves and other detritus that doesn't go too deep in the soil. So the trees are very prone to absorb these nutrients when they're readily available in the surface of the of the soil. If we move just a bit to down the trail a little bit, I will show you prop roots. So please come with me. This is what scientists call prop roots. Very different than buttresses, of course, or stilt roots as well. So notice that there's a dozen of aerial structures that prop out of the trunk of the tree and anchor to the ground. Notice that this palm, this is a palm, by the way. It's kind of tilted because of the gradient of the terrain right here. And the interesting thing is that these roots don't last too long. They just have a limited duration or a limited lifespan. As these roots, which are all covered by lichens and mosses and other forms, begin to rot, the palm is going to start putting new roots on this side to actually anchor the weight of the palm on this particular side of the plant. As it does so, what the plant is going to do is just give up the ones on the right side and start emphasizing on the ones on the left. And after a while, after a number of months or years, this plant is going to move from where it is right here to over on this side, acquiring some mobility. This is interesting. It's one of the most amazing phenomena, and that's why these palms are called walking palms in tropical rainforests. Some of these palms as well are photoreactive, which means that they react to where the sunlight or soil availability is more abundant. So they may acquire mobility as well in search of sunlight. This is Socratea durissima. It's a huge palm. Look at the size of it. It's probably some 25 meters tall with an incredible crown, huge leaves. In fact, we're standing, if you look around, this is one of the fronds of the palm right here. Just fell off the crown. Look at the size of this one. It's just incredible. People also extract out of these palms heart of palm. Perhaps you've ate heart of palm before. And also they use the trunk of these trees that we were just looking at for construction. In some indigenous regions of the Amazon, people use these palms to build structures, to build homes and flooring, because it's extremely durable, and that's why the name Socratea durissima, meaning extremely hard. We hear, I don't know if you can perceive the sounds, but those are oropendolas, birds in the canopy, members of the oriole family, feeding on available fruit of a wild nutmeg tree. When you walk through the tropical rainforest, sometimes you stumble upon great surprises, but sometimes you can stumble upon snakes. Fortunately, this time we stumbled upon this great epiphytic plant. The term epiphyte means that it lives on top of another one. And of course, in this case, we have an anthurium. It's a plant that lives on top of another one. In this case, is a tree. And you can see this very amazing root system. Look at the root hairs of this plant. Um, and as it remains attached to the trunk of the tree, most of these tiny little hairs are going to trap dead leaves that fall from the canopy, forming a detritus that ultimately will provide the plant with great nutrients. In presence of tiny microorganisms that live in this very complex root system you see here, um, this will then become a perfect habitat for orchids. Look at this. This one, unfortunately, is not blooming, but we have a tiny orchid here in the genus Sobralia, which is called usually day orchid here in Costa Rica. It blooms only for a day before it's found by orchid bees and pollinated. But it's beautiful. We have three different varieties. One is lavender, another one is purple, and probably this one is purple because it's got small leaves. And one with broader leaves is white and is probably the most commonly found. Things like this fall for various reasons: strong winds or strong rains or monkeys. Monkeys sometimes wander through the forest looking for insects, especially white-faced capuchins. And of course, as they try to dig out caterpillars or other stuff, they simply move the plant off its original position and make it fall on the ground. The likelihood for this plant to make it, actually to survive, is very low because it needs very specific conditions of the canopy to be able to survive. But if we look, we're going to try to make a 360 view here of the trail just to show you the beauty and the spatial distribution of the tropical trees here. Notice that we have a number of fairly good sized trees down the trail on the right and left hand side. Um, there might be a predominant species, but the majority are different species. And as we turn around here, we find other trees. Notice the coloration of the bark. This is something very cool. Some dendrologists, which are tree experts, are able to tell people like you the differences between species of trees just by looking at the color of the bark of the trees. Many different varieties of trees, like this one for example, um, have a little bit of damage on the trunk, as you can see, and there are tiny little pygmy squirrels in this forest that feed on the bark of the trunk of certain species of trees, not all, but of certain species of trees. Um, so this one in particular is one that the squirrels visit. This is a hardwood. Um, Hard for me to remember that there are more than 2,000 species of trees only for Costa Rica, which is by far much more than what you can find in all continental United States, probably twice as much. Uh, Here at the station, we may have some 200 different varieties of trees, which is a lot. And of course, if you don't see the flowers or the composition of the leaves, it's very hard to tell otherwise. Um, I can see though a sapling of a wild nutmeg behind the tree right here, and usually you can find saplings of the tree you're looking at right by the root system, indicating that probably what you're looking at is a wild nutmeg. Over here we have another cool tree. Look at the size of this one right here. It's another beauty probably 30 meters, 90 feet tall. A lot of bromeliads up on top, and something called birds, tree fern, which is a huge fern that makes perfect habitat for a lot of birds to nest. But there's some bromeliads hanging in the main trunk of the tree, as you can see. And notice that this is a much paler type of tree trunk with blotches of white in some parts. It's kind of hard to see in the video. That's why you have to, guys, you have to come to the tropics to see this in person. This tree is called Vocacia, and it's a relatively soft wood, fast growing, but it contains in the bark a substance that Indians use to stain fabrics, and to use it as a mosquito repellent as well. We will talk about chemical compounds in another conversation, but also it's got buttresses on the bottom, as you can see um, from here. And one interesting thing here is that the difference between a jungle and a primary forest is that you can walk through a primary forest with these. You don't need the need of anything because there's very little stuff growing on the forest floor. Whereas jungles are so impenetrable because they're relatively young that you really require the need of a machete or somebody to guide you through, because it's almost impenetrable. So here we're pretty much looking at a primary forest with tall emergent trees. Um, you can hear the stream and the bellbirds in the background, which is really cool. Look at this other buttress here on the right, on the bottom. Notice how the root system spreads. Some species of trees spread their buttresses meters and meters away from the main trunk. It's incredible. Look at this vine on the ground, for instance. This is what I was telling you. This vine right here in the ground. Look at it sending its tendrils. These are called tendrils. These tendrils are gonna grow fast and are gonna start climbing again to the top of one of these trees. And then, of course, here's a tree fall, right? And then, of course, these vines are going to start climbing and are going to claim a space in the crown of the trees and are going to compete for light. But at the same time, they are going to add immensely to the spatial distribution of the top layers of the forest, increasing the amount of habitat for many creatures that in other ecosystems of the planet otherwise would not exist because they would not have this kind of conditions.